Hi everyone. In this video, I'm going to be going through some examples of some problems referring to time. So if we look at the first one, it says the clock shows when the soccer game ended. Write the time, then circle AM or PM. So when we look at this clock, that is an analog clock. It has hands. We have a short hand and a long hand. The short hand is our hour hand, and the long hand is our minute hand. So first we look at our hour hand, our short hand, and it is pointing towards the 5, but not quite there. So whenever we're thinking about our hours, we always want to go back to the number that is past. So it's past 4 and not quite to 5 yet. So we know it's going to be 4 something. So I'm going to put 4 and my colon. Now when I'm thinking of my minutes, I want to count by 5s for each number of our hours. So when I start at 12, I go to 1 and that's 5 minutes. Then 2 is 10 minutes. 3 is 15 minutes. 4 is 20 minutes. The 5 is 25 minutes. The 6 is 30 minutes or 1/2 hour. The 7 is 35 minutes. The 8 represents 40 minutes past the hour. The 9 is 45 minutes. And the 10, which our minute hand is on, is 50 minutes. If we would go to 11, that would be 55. And then once we get to 12, that's a new hour. Okay? So since it's on the 10, that means that it is 50 minutes past 4 o'clock. Okay? So that would make it 4:50. All right? And if we're talking about what time a soccer game ends, we play soccer usually in the evening. So that is afternoon. All right? And that's the 12 o'clock, it's in the middle of the day. So if it's after 12 noon, then it's going to be PM. If it was after 12 a.m. or midnight, then it would be AM. Okay? So if it's in the evening, it's PM. If it's in the morning, it's AM. All right, the next one. The clock shows when Jeff gets up for school. Write the time, then circle AM or PM. So if he's getting up for school, we're thinking about the morning. All right, and if we're talking about morning, we're talking about AM. So I'm going to circle AM to start with because we know we're talking about our morning times. Now, if we look at this clock, we want to look at the small hand or the short hand first. And it is close to the 6, it's a little bit past the 6. So we know it's going to be 6 something. And if you think about school, a lot of people get up around 6 something or a little after that. So that makes sense. So if we're looking, we know it's 6 is the hour. Now we have to figure out the minute. So how many minutes past 6 o'clock? Well, we said before 1 o'clock or the 1 on the clock means 5 minutes past, and the 2 on the clock means 10 minutes past. So that means it is 6:10. It is 10 minutes past 6. All right, and that would be AM, remember, because we're talking about the morning. All right, let's go to the next one. Write the time on this clock using words. Okay, so we need to figure out what it would look like to start with. Then we can change it into words. And our words is just how do we say it. So if we're looking at this clock, our shorthand or our hour hand is just past the 6. That means it's 6 something. So I'm going to write that off to the side, what our digital clock representation would look like. So now if we look at the minute hand, it is on the 3, so we count by 5s. 1 would be 5, 2 is 10, 3 is 15. So that would be 15 minutes past 6. We also can think of that as quarter past, because if you take our clock and you cut it into 4 pieces, each of those pieces is 15 minutes. All right, because it's 15, then 30, then 45, then 60, which is 1 hour. So if we think of these in pieces of 4, we think of $1 has 4 quarters. So each 1/4 piece is 15 minutes. So if we're thinking about how we would write this in words, we could say 6:15 is one way. So 6:15. Or we could say 6:15. All right, so those are just two different ways that we can write the time of this clock in words. All right, let's go to the next couple. What is the time on this clock? Well, let's look at our hour hand to start. If we're looking at this hour hand, I can see that it's a little bit past 8. So I know it's 8 something. So I'm going to put my 8 as my hour and then my colon, because our colon separates our hour from our minute times. And because the minute hand is on the 1, I know that it's 5 minutes past 8, or 8:05. And when we have our time, if it's single digits, so if it's 1 through 9, so if it's 8:01, 8:02, 8:03, 8:04, 8:05, 8:06, 8:07, 8:08, 8:09, we have to have that O with before the number, because it has to have 2 digits after our colon for our minutes. Okay? So that clock shows 8:05, or 5 minutes after 8. Now the second one, what is the time on this clock? Well, let's see. The shorthand is just past the 7, so I have to go back. And we can think of this as a little hook on our hour hand, and we hook it back to the number that comes before that we've already passed. And so that's 7 something. And our something, we have to figure out our minutes with the long hand. Well, the long hand, or the minute hand, is on the 4. So if we count by 5s, we have 5, 10, 15, and 20. So it's 7:20 on that clock. All right, let's go to the last two we're going to look at. What is the time on this clock? We always start with our hour hand. And this hour hand is between the 3 and the 4. And remember, our hour hand has a hook and it goes backwards. So it's going to be 3 something. So I'm going to start with my 3. And then my minute hand is on the 6. So if I count by 5s, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, it would be 3:30, or half past 3. All right, and the last clock says, what is the time on this clock? Well, let's look at this really carefully. The small hand, or the short hand, is pointing at the 6. All right, so it's right on the 6. That means it's 6 something. But if we look at the minute hand, it's on the 12. And I said before, if we counted by 5s and we get to 60, and once we get to 60, it means a new hour. So that means that if the short hand or the hour hand is on a number and the minute hand is on the 12, that means it is just 6 o'clock. And that's just 6 on the dot. There's no minutes past. So we just write that as 6:00. Okay? So those are just some examples of how we tell time on an analog clock. So if you're at home, and you have an analog clock, you can practice telling time. If not, you can always refer back to these problems, and you can pause them before I went through them and see if you can figure it out before I did. All right. Hope these help you guys. See ya.